We're live. Hey, friends. How's it going? I'm Scott Hanselman, and I'm so incredibly happy to be here today to spend some time with you. I wish that I could be somewhere on the continent in person, but of course, since we're all virtual right now, that's not possible. But I do have my Zimbabwean flag representing my wife's family, and I wish that I could get back that side sometime soon. I'm thrilled that we have people from all over the world spending time with us today on this wonderful virtual event. And I thank Marlene and all the organizers for all of their hard work. I hope you appreciate them as well. I want to talk about a couple of things. This is actually kind of two talks that have been combined together. One talk was about personal productivity, and one was about being a social developer. So I kind of combined them because I think that there's a lot of pressure right now to be out there on the internet and produce lots of content, and we're always talking about hustle culture and things like that. And I want to talk about where I think parts of that are a problem and why I think there's an opportunity for us to be our best selves online. Now, I made these horrible slides just to give you an example of how easy it is. You can kind of make things a little bit nicer. This is Comic Sans, and I'm told that you're not supposed to do that if you're going to be a good content creator. So if you have some slides like this, which is just, text on a background, give it a nice little font, makes it look more official, makes it look more cool. Then you just add some free stock photography. Suddenly everything looks so much nicer. And maybe you give it a nice Instagram filter and you look like $1,000,000. And that right there off the bat makes me look like an official conference speaker, and it looks so much nicer than my first slide there. It's the little things like that. Takes a little amount of work, but it makes for a really nice situation. And again, I wish I was there for you all in person. I wish that we were all together in the hallway track, spending time together, but we can't. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Scott Hanselman, and I work for Microsoft, but I've worked in open source for many, many years. In fact, I've been in software for almost 30 years, and when I was in open source a number of years ago, and I went to work at Microsoft, a lot of people said that I was a sellout. They're like, oh man, you just went there for the money. Why'd you do that? Why'd you leave us in open source? And I have to say, it made me feel a little bit sad, made me feel bad, but somehow I was able to work through those issues working for the company. Here's a picture of me before Microsoft, and here's a picture of me after Microsoft, and it worked out pretty okay. But seriously though, everyone wants to try to be a success in software and open source online, and it can be a little bit stressful. And even though I've been doing this for many, many years, I want to say out loud and make sure that we say this to ourselves and we say this to our friends, that we are really all amateurs. It doesn't matter if you've been doing software for 4 years or 40 years. Software moves so fast and changes so much that virtually everything that I learned in my degree is useless now. Some of the theory was great, but all the languages that I learned are dead. So if we remember that as we are a community, that we're all amateurs and that there's really no professionals, we're just learning and growing together, and we all make mistakes. I see that Visile is saying he didn't see the before and after pictures. Did you see the before? This is me before and me after. I think it looks a little bit like me without a gray beard. We make mistakes, and we all make these mistakes, and it's very common to do these things. And it's important to remember that when we're producing content, because a lot of times people feel stressed out, like you are a community member, maybe you're a community leader, and you need to be the best. You need to be the one that knows everything. And I think we need to normalize the fact that we don't know everything, that we're not experts, we're not leaders in the sense that I know it all and I should tell you everything about how these technologies work. I think that CSS is a really good example. Let me make sure that can folks see my screen? because I'm hearing in the chat that there might be an issue with slides, because I'm showing some fun things and people are maybe not seeing it. So let's take a look for just a moment and we'll check on that from a tech support perspective. It's a good idea to double check. Maybe Marlene can let me know if people can see my shared slides or not. Just to make sure, because the slides are part of the experience, aren't they? All right, we can see the slides. So you see LeBron right now, my friends? Okay, great. I'll slow down a little bit. Fantastic. So I was saying about how important it is to remember that we're not experts. And if we look at something like CSS, which is really more complicated than you realize, someone says that CSS is so expressive and so obvious and so easy to understand. But this is how I feel when I'm using CSS. And when I see experts out there talking about it, I wonder how are they able to possibly understand that. Another great example is languages like JavaScript, right? I know this is a Python conference, but we find ourselves learning JavaScript to do our jobs. This is me learning JavaScript for the first time. It can be really stressful to be told that you have to be an expert in a certain technology if you want to be successful. And I think one of the great things to remember, of course, when you think about a language like JavaScript, is that you don't need to learn the bad parts, because there's just so many bad parts. Now, when I say that we're all amateurs, I think we need to be humble when we're creating content. And if you look at someone like Tim Berners-Lee, Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web. He's in fact Sir Tim Berners-Lee because he was knighted by the Queen. And I think it was interesting because so many people out there want to have senior engineer by their titles. So many people want to have senior web developer or principal web developer. And if you look at someone like Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the web himself, notice that he did not put senior by his name. He didn't even put the. Imagine what a flex that would be if Tim Berners-Lee said, title, the web developer. You meet him at a conference, and you say, hey, how's it going? Are you a senior web developer? And he says, no, I'm the web developer. I made it. That was me. He didn't know. He didn't know when he invented the web that it would become this amazing thing that we're all using and that we're using to make applications. It's one of those things that you start when you create something and you don't know how far it's going to go. You don't expect that it's going to become as big as it is. And that's the way it is with all technologies that we create. Any open source project that you start with could become something huge, and you'll never know. You won't know. Someone will say, did you have a plan? And you'll say, I didn't have a plan. I was just trying to build something special and exciting. I think another good example is something like Adobe PDF. No one would have expected that PDF would become the 5th most popular religion that people want to convert to. This is my Google search when I want to convert to something, and it looks like you can convert to all these religions and also to PDF. Now, I've been writing code for a very, very long time. I wrote some code in C++ in the early 90s. Some of you may be old enough to remember this, but this was how Windows looked before there were actual windows. And one of the things that I think is worth pointing out is when people are out there talking about how many years experience they have to ask yourself, do you have 20 years experience, or do you have the same years experience 20 times? And by that I mean you have to be intentional. You have to be deliberate in your practice. Deliberate practice is a really, really important thing. You may have met people like this. You may meet them in the community. You may meet them at work. And someone says, yeah, I've been working for 20 years. Yeah, I've got 20 years experience. But are they learning each year? Are they growing each year? Are they trying new things each year? Are they stretching each year? This is a process of being intentional about your career, about your learning, about how you decide to be. You could be old, but that doesn't mean that you know everything. And if it's just the same year, the same mistakes over and over for 20 years, then you're not really growing. So there's an opportunity for us as digital natives, as people who are on the internet, people who were born on the internet, to really grow by writing, by sharing, by being a community, by going to conferences like this. And that's going to let us really have new experiences and new years as we go forward in life. Now, I do this by writing a lot. I've been writing a ton. I've been writing on my blog for about 18 or 19 years, and I write about being a phony, feeling like I have imposter syndrome. I've written about my opinions on different pieces of software. I build things in my garage. So here I built a video arcade. I've even blogged about my garden, square foot gardening. Everybody needs a garden. I've written a bunch of phone apps for dead phones that no one uses anymore, like the Windows Phone. I even wrote a blood sugar management system for diabetics on the Palm Pilot in the early 90s. And also my son, who is now 15, I wrote a game for him called Baby Smash at babysmash.com. It's still out there. Great for kids, lets them smash on the keyboard. I've written a bunch of books that are not really very good. You shouldn't check them out. I've got a couple of podcasts. I've written about being a better speaker. So why am I doing this? I'm doing it because I want to put out any learning that I'm doing out into the world so I can hopefully make the world a better place. But it's important to note that I'm not doing it because I think I know everything. What I'm doing, and what I would encourage you to do, is to learn in public. There's too many people out there that are acting like they're experts, and those experts talk down to us, and they have the knowledge, and we're here and we go, tell us the knowledge. I'm an expert. Blah, 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 blah. What I want to do is I want a level playing field where we learn in public together, and we make a community where people are able to share without fear of being yelled at if they make a mistake. Because if you can learn in public, you make a mistake and you gently correct it, and then you learn and you put out new content, then everyone is going to be able to grow. And then we're not at the mercy of all of the experts to tell us how things need to be. So this involves a number of skills that are not technical skills. These are more human skills. And I kind of break them down in the terms of your career skills. The term marketing yourself, you might hear the word personal brand. I'm not a big fan of that myself, but marketing yourself really means being intentional about who you are, and then deciding how you're going to learn and if you're going to learn in public. And in order to do all of this, you need to be somewhat productive. And I'll talk to you about some of my philosophies around productivity in just a moment. But I mentioned earlier about feeling like an imposter. This is really common in the software space. Being an imposter is that sense that I think I know what I'm doing, but maybe people are going to figure out that I don't really. Like, I shouldn't have this job, and I'm only like one chapter ahead, and I don't really understand. I'm just really a good Googler. I'm not really a developer. I'm just a really good Googler. And that feeling of imposter syndrome can be really overwhelming. I worked with a friend of mine named Rob Connery, and we put together a book called The Imposter's Handbook. And this is a great book for self-taught developers, for people who maybe know how to code but don't have a big background in computer science. That's something to think about. Is there anything that you can do to fill in the gaps of your knowledge that make you feel more like you belong in the community? Because I feel like all of us do belong. I've also put out a lot of free content. This is a great little movie. It's a feature-length production. I think it's about an hour and a half or 2 hours long. It's a movie that we made called Get Involved in Tech. We put it out on Pluralsight, and it's free. You do not need a Pluralsight subscription to watch this movie. And in that movie, we talk about blogging and Twitter and GitHub and Stack Overflow and user groups and conferences and all the things that can make you a happier and more productive developer. So if you start getting involved in tech, like I know all of you are, this is a really good question. And we've got a question in the comments there that I'll mention as well. When you're starting out in tech, there's an overwhelming pressure to do all of these things. Look at that list. One of the things that's interesting about that list is that coding isn't on that list. Like, I thought I was going to be programming things. I thought I was going to be making. Do I have to blog and tweet and do Stack Overflow and user groups and be a community organizer? I think it's really important for us to realize that to be a successful tech person, a successful programmer, you don't need to do all of those things. You should only do the ones that feed your spirit, that make you happy, and that move you forward. Maybe you do just blogging. Maybe you don't do any of these things. Maybe you just do Twitter. Another great question here from Ahmad in the chat was about, if you share a new thing that you learn, should you repeat it or should you share the resource? I think a lot of times we find ourselves not blogging and not doing YouTubes and not doing talks at conferences because there's a fear that, well, someone's already done that whole thing's been done. I mean, I'm not going to do a Python 101 course. It's been done. But this is the thing. Your experience as a new cloud developer or a new Python developer is your experience. So you should create content, even though it's already been done. In fact, I'm doing a Git 101 course right now, and I'm doing it without looking at anyone else's Git courses because it's my experience and me learning Git, and I think it has value to put those things out. So I want to encourage people who are thinking about being more social, putting out more content, to not look at other people's content because your journey, your experience is super valuable. It's how you did things. Now, I do some of these things in the list, but not all of them. I don't have to compare myself to other people by doing 9 things, by doing the most. Here's some examples of some friends that I think do a really great job. Here's one. So Grace McJones works with me at Microsoft on Azure. And what she does, I think, is really great, is she uses LinkedIn. That's her blogging platform. That's her YouTube platform. I've never seen someone use LinkedIn in that way. Some people say, well, LinkedIn is just Facebook for business. But it can be a blogging platform. It can be a video platform. You can do live video there. I'd never thought about that until I met Grace. So she's turned LinkedIn into her place. I have a friend who is on Twitch, and he does everything on Twitch. And he loves Twitch because it feeds his spirit. He likes live coding. That stresses me out. So I found my place on YouTube. And I do my work on YouTube because it feeds my spirit. It makes me happy. So rather than looking at a list of things and feeling the weight and the stress of having to do all of these things, I try all of these different things, and I pick the ones that make me the most happy. There's a great comment here in the chat. It's about giving a different perspective. Exactly. Your perspective is important because how I learned Python is different from how Grace learned it, or Ali, or Marlene, and those experiences are all valid. And if you think about all the different people and all of our different ages and gender and races and countries and languages and all the different platforms and blogs and tweets and GitHubs, there's a combination of places. There's so many places and so many cool people and so many cool technologies. You can put your content out there and you don't need to worry about whether someone's done it before. So definitely do it. Marlene in the comments here is making a really great point that you learn more when you're preparing a talk, and Ali said the same thing. It's a really great point because the content you make is for you. Now, I've been blogging for almost 20 years. Was I blogging the whole time for you? Like I'm sitting here in my house in Portland, Oregon, and I'm going, I have so much knowledge, I'm going to blog about it for the people. I'll give them my knowledge because I'm so clever. No, it was a diary. It's just so I can Google myself later and find out, oh, good, I forgot I had blogged about that error message, and I'm glad that I did that. It's so important to think about things like that. So a lot of people have a sense that there's no time to blog. Well, I don't have time, or what I'm working on is secret. What would I have to say? I don't know enough to blog. I think that you can actually be really honest with people about what you know and what you don't know. Here's a good example. I bought a 3D printer. I bought a little 3D printer a couple of years ago, and I wrote a blog post about the basics of 3D printing. Now remember, not an expert, just a person that bought a 3D printer. So I was really clear. I actually joked about it in the title of the blog, and you can see there that I said, from someone with 16 whole hours experience. I think I'd been printing for 2 days at that point. So I wrote up how 3D printing, what it meant to me as a beginner. I'm sure I got some things wrong, and that's okay. Now, why would I write this up though? Why would I take the time to slap the keyboard and write that up? This is where productivity comes in. This is really important. This is one of the most important things that's changed my life and how I think about producing content and sharing things with the community. I think people need to conserve their keystrokes. So what does that mean? Let's say that one of my new friends here, I'll just look in the chat, let's say Maxwell emails me after the talk and says, hey, great talk, Scott. Thanks so much for coming to our conference. Thanks for coming to PyCon Africa. I have a question. And he asks an amazing question. And I go, that's a great question. Oh my goodness. But then at the same time, like, I don't know this person. I got stuff to do. Do I give Maxwell the gift of my keystrokes? And why would I think about it like that? What a weird way to think about it. Well, you have a finite number of keystrokes left in your hands before you die. That's a really weird and morbid thing to say, isn't it? Well, you can only type so fast, and you're only going to live so long, and you're not going to get any extra keystrokes. They're not going to give you more time. So if Maxwell says, I have a question about your talk, and it's an amazing question, and a really good question after a talk is a gift. So what Maxwell is doing is actually giving me a gift of an amazing question. But then I might type on the keyboard for 2,000 keystrokes, 3,000 keystrokes. Takes me 40 minutes. And I mail this amazing answer to this amazing question back to Maxwell. And Maxwell's like, cool. How many lives have I affected there? One random person emails me. I give them all this free content. And they go, cool. What should I do instead? What I should do is I should write a blog post with the answer to the question and then link back to it. Then I send my new friend the link to the blog post. And if one additional person sees that blog post, if one additional person Googles and finds that blog post, I've doubled and tripled and quadrupled the keystrokes that I had. I can actually get free keystrokes because I'm sleeping and 10 people read my blog post. Dustin makes a great comment here, which is very true. I type 100 words a minute, but about 90 of it is just backspace, which is very true. I actually made a website about this that I would encourage you to check out. It's at keysleft.com. I literally made a website where you can put in how fast you type and how old you are, and it will tell you how many books you have left in you, how many computer programs you have left. And the reason that I do this is not to make you feel sad or feel weird about how long you're going to live. It's about being intentional. It's about deciding what you're going to do. This is super important because I feel, particularly as a person who's a little bit older, that you've only got so much time here. Do you want to let your life happen by default, or do you want to decide what you're going to do? So this has informed my experience as a social developer, because if I have this limited number of keystrokes, I don't put them in email. I put them somewhere with a URL. So I would encourage you to, anytime, whether it be at work or personal, if someone sends you an email and you're going to type an answer, where can you put that? On Medium, on Twitter, on Facebook, hopefully on a blog, somewhere with your own URL, if you can, so that you can share that information with other people. I've also gone recently and I started doing YouTubes, and these are super fun because it turns out you can use a tool like OBS, the Open Broadcasting Studio. It's free and open source, and I can just press record and I can start talking. And it's kind of cool. I discovered last week that if I make a funny YouTube video thumbnail, it makes me look like I'm official, and I'm not really that official. So I've been writing about computer stuff that they didn't teach you. Like, for example, Git 101 basics. And what's cool about that is if someone emails me, hey, Scott, I want to learn Git, I send them to that video. I've made a frequently asked questions of my life. I'll give an example. If I said to Marlene, hey, I love the conference, help me organize an online conference. If she spends one-on-one time with me teaching me how to organize a conference with the other organizers, that is taking up a lot of her time. But if she wrote up a cookbook or a pamphlet that explained how to do an online conference, that means her keystrokes scale. And that's a really great way to think about it. Another thing that I've done recently is I've had a podcast. I've done over 750 episodes every Thursday for the last 15 years. I've had a great conversation. So how many times, see, Marlene's going to publish a book soon. That's amazing. That's great. Her keystrokes are going to good work. So my podcast is a conversation about technology every Thursday with a fresh face. And what's great about this is, you know how often people say, can I pick your brain? Can I take you out for coffee? I want to just pick your brain a little bit. I don't really have time to have coffee with you. I'm sure you're a lovely person, but there's only so many hours and there's only so many coffees that I can potentially have. But if I recorded our conversation, put a little music at the beginning, now our coffee turns into an experience for everybody, and it's a shared conversation. This podcast is actually just 750 coffees that I've had with new friends where we share that information. But when you make a piece of content, when you make a video, when you make a podcast, if you can convert it to text, that can become a blog post or a pamphlet or a book. I could potentially take the transcripts from over 300 hours of technical content and then turn that into a book. And that then multiplies my content. So if you learn something new, write it up, send it around, but can it become a YouTube? Can it become a podcast? Can it become a book? Can it become a pamphlet? Can it become a course? One piece of content, one thing that you made can turn into a multiplier of different kinds of content, and that's really exciting. Now, one of the other things that I think is really important is social media and all of the things that are happening in the world right now are slowing us down. If you think about someone who is sprinting or someone is running and then they suddenly get interrupted, you don't think about a runner like Usain Bolt and he's running and he's focused and he's sprinting and then he gets a tweet and in the middle of the sprint checks his phone. Well, that would make the sprinting less useful. You're not really effective or efficient when you're not focused on the thing that you're doing. So I would really encourage people to think about, am I in my flow? Am I in my productive place? And this gets back to that idea of being intentional. When are you most productive? Are you most productive in the middle of the night? Are you a morning person? Are you best after lunch? We know when we are productive, but we don't set up our systems to really make ourselves productive. When was the last time you set up a meeting with yourself to sit quietly and think about how I can set my day up to be most productive. I did this recently, and I said, I code really well from about 2 in the afternoon till about 6. That's when my brain works the best. I make YouTube videos really well when everyone's asleep after midnight. So all my videos are late night in the dark like this. And I write emails really well in the morning. So when I know about that, I can schedule my meetings, my podcasts, and the different things I want to do because I've been intentional about when I'm good at something, and then I'm unapologetic about when I'm not good at something. This is me in my flow. One of the things that you can do to remain in your flow is to mute words and block easily on Twitter. I think a lot of times people spend an inordinate amount of time arguing with strangers on the internet. And remember that arguing with strangers on the internet does not ship your product, and it doesn't make your software have fewer bugs. Those are gifts that you're giving people, strangers. So why would you put any energy into arguing with a stranger on the internet? Or really, why would you talk to anyone that doesn't love you? No one has ever changed their political opinion for any reason because you argued with them on Twitter. The other thing that I would encourage you to do is not worry about this silly green graph that shows your contributions on GitHub. Maybe you work for a company that doesn't use GitHub. That green graph is not a representation of your value or whether or not you're a good programmer or not. I'm going to skip over a little bit of these things. I also want to talk about internal advocacy. Not everyone is an extrovert. Not everyone has a big personality and they want to be on stage at a conference. So when you're an introvert or maybe a quieter person, can you advocate inside your company, inside your working group? Can you give a talk to 4 or 5 people, like a lunch talk or a brown bag? Education doesn't have to be a megaphone where you're talking to thousands of people, and if you don't have thousands of followers, there's no value. You can also advocate for good software practices and teach people inside your company or inside your group. You can do one-on-one career coaching. You can be a welcoming community member. You can do small morale events. There's all kinds of things you can do, even if you don't want to be a big, visible, external person. So if you're out there and you're creating content, you want to try to stay relevant, and the best way to do that is to remind yourself that everyone is an expert at something. And even if you don't feel like an expert, you are an expert at you, your experience, your journey, and writing about that, talking about that, blogging, YouTubing about that has value because everyone is an expert at something. I think that people are not blogging enough, and they're not doing this at domains that they control. I think we're at a really interesting time right now in software where if you can afford to register a domain, you can get a free SSL certificate at Let's Encrypt, and you can afford to get just even a static website or a free GitHub Pages website. You can blog for free. So GitHub Pages would be a really great static website, or even the smallest hosting provider would allow you to have your domain, your content that you control. You don't know if Medium is going to go away and take all of your content with you. But I know that I bought Hanselman.com, my last name, 20 years ago, and it is my domain. They cannot take my domain away. They can't take my URLs away. So stop giving Twitter and Facebook the gift of your keystrokes. Own your content. And when you're out there, be yourself with consistent and professional usernames and clear avatars. That way you can be one kind persona. This is some examples of some folks out there that I think are really great at branding themselves online. Angie Jones has a great avatar that she uses everywhere and a really organized blog that I like a lot. Some people don't want their photographs online. I really liked this woman's website. She actually has quotes on her website about why she's awesome. I think that is so cool. She actually has quotes about how cool she is, almost like they're movie quotes of why this is a great film that you should watch. This gentleman, Chris Coyer, has a great website, and he actually has choices about how his bio looks, and it shows that he's a web person because you can pick whether or not it's HTML or Markdown. One of my favorite developers, Safia Abdullah, has a cool URL that literally tells you how awesome she is. It's safia.rocks, and she's got a great introduction about how she's an open source developer and what she does and what she works on. These are examples of folks that are putting themselves out there, and they're making great content that's going to make you a better person. So I would encourage you to go out there. If you don't know where to start, find a mentor. But I would also encourage you to be a mentor. I don't think that you get to do just one. So I have mentees that I am mentoring, but I also have people who mentor me. It's a two-way experience. So my call to action to you before we go into the Q&A, and Marlene joins me here, is that you go out there and share your energy, put out good work. Don't waste your keystrokes. Certainly don't waste them arguing with strangers on the internet. Be kind, put out good things, and that energy will come back to you. Thank you very much for having me at the conference. And let's do some Q&A, Marlene. Hello.
Yeah. But yes, so I am just going to look. Your blog has been an inspiration. I will start with a question maybe while people write. Please, if you have questions, write them in the chat. But I was going to say, so Scott, how is the best way? So I think a lot of the time, I think some people want to be content creators to be able to put themselves in a better position in terms of maybe getting a job or getting a following. And for you, what would you say? First of all, do you think it's important to have a large following? Is that something that's valuable to people, that people should strive to do? And then secondly, if you do think it's valuable, how do people actually get a following? Yeah.
Okay. So that's a really good question. So when you said that, I noticed that you said a large following. I don't think it's important to have a large following. Having numbers doesn't matter. It's garbage. I don't care. If I'm a hiring manager, I want to Google for you with Bing or whatever, and I want to find you and I want to say, look, here's a person with a domain, a well-organized blog, and thoughtful writing. When I go to your blog, when I Google you, Marlene, I see positivity, I see good content, I see technical excellence. Nowhere in the Googling for you as a hiring manager or HR person do I see any numbers about following. And if you have 1 million followers on YouTube or you have 10, does either of those things make you a better shipper if I'm hiring you to ship software? Stop worrying about the likes, my friends. The following is all BS. It doesn't matter. Famous programmer, 10x developer, it's all trash. I just want to see someone who's excited, who is enthusiastic, who makes things, and who has a moderately organized blog. Here's another thing to think about. People say, well, I don't have time to blog. Can you blog once a week? If you could blog once a month and you did it for 2 or 3 years, you'd have 30 or 40 articles. And if I'm a hiring manager and I find 30, 40 great technical articles written by you, just one a month, that's gold. I'm like, wow, they're a good writer, good communicator, they're a coder. Oh, this is gold. Now I blog twice a week. Why twice? Because once didn't feel like enough, and every day is stupid, right? That's insane. So twice a week meant 100 a year. 100 a year, do that for a couple of years. You wrote a book and you just did it in your spare time. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. So that answers my question. That's really great. I know Jeff has a question, and Jeff says, don't you think that creating on your own domain will make you lost time in developing the website than writing your content? So would you lose time instead of putting it into writing your own content?
That is a very good question. So that's actually, there's two ways to look at that. So Jeff is concerned about creating the website and is different than developing the content. Well, so you don't have to do that. You can just do GitHub pages. You can do Medium. You could make a WordPress site in a weekend. You would require zero effort. You go and get a free theme, you put the site up, you're done. So the argument that you're wasting time developing the website, I think, doesn't hold. But if you can run a website, keep it up, keep the SSL certificates registered. If it goes down, get an email, put it back up again. Every time that happens, that's a thing you can write about. You now have experience running a website 24/7. I can say that I've kept my website up for 20 years, and I can talk about all the war stories about the time, like here's one. I have a bug in my website where it goes down for an hour every year when the United States does daylight savings time. That's an article. Like, it's a stupid thing. Like at 2 a.m., the time becomes 1 a.m., my website gets confused. I could do a whole talk about how that's stupid and why my software is buggy because I have the experience of running the website. So I would say to Jeff that the creating the content on your own domain, the developing the website, those are articles to write. Everything that happens to you is a moment, is a gift that you can then use to turn into content.
Absolutely. Thank you for that answer. Then Vuisile, and this is a question I had as well. Vuisile was asking, not sure if you've covered this already, how do you balance everything you do? Do you have any tips on how to be productive or find good balance between work, life, and content creation?
Mr. Ndlovu, that is a very good question. And I'm actually going to bring up a link that I will put in the chat that is my complete list of productivity tips. It is about intentionality. I talked about deliberate practice. It's not about willpower. People think it's about sleeping less, drinking more caffeine, just hustle culture. Yeah, man, you're not working hard enough. No, it's not. It's about balance, but it's also not about just losing hours. If you can be intentional and go, okay, it's noon, I have 2 hours until whatever the next thing. Am I going to use this time, or am I just going to let this time happen? So for me, it's about scheduling, and it's about being deliberate about what's important. Making a list, sorting it, and then saying no to stuff. Like right now. Here's a great example. I emailed you and asked you to come on my podcast. And you know what you did that was smart? You said, no, not right now.
What?
You did that. You remember, because you said no. And no, you're organizing a conference. You sorted the things in your life that are important. You were intentional. You said, talk to me when the conference is over.
That sounds terrible. That sounds like I was just like, no,
but that's brilliant. That's what's important. So to my friend, Mr. Ndlovu, what do? You sort the things, you put impactful things at the top, and you say no, or you postpone stuff till later. So what you did was great and natural. Saying no is the most powerful thing that you can do to be a productive individual.
Definitely. And by the way, I will be on Scott's podcast for anyone who's concerned that I completely...
The conference is over when it...
Yes, very excited for that as well. So Oyinda Mola is asking, what will you say to a beginner just starting with programming?
That is a good one. So Oyinda Mola, the thing is that there's computer science, there's software engineering, and there's programming. and they're different stuff. The science of computers and how they are built is very theoretical, and you go to university for it, and it's interesting, but it's very much not practical. It's very much theoretical. Then there's software engineering, which is the literal, how does one ship software effectively? It's things like pair programming and extreme development and Scrum and project management and unit testing. And then there's programming, which is the syntax and all those kind of things. Acknowledging that those things are different and thinking about the ones that you're good at, the ones you want to learn, as opposed to just saying, I want to be a coder. So you have to think about your systems. So the thing I would say to a beginner who's just getting started is to kind of make a list of the things that you know about computers, look at the gaps, think about what like looks interesting to you. Like if you're a data scientist, do you really need to know about the internals of the task manager or the activity monitor on a Mac and how processes and ports and stuff? No, you're a data scientist. So you can say no, you cannot learn stuff. So for a beginner, focus and consciously say, I'm not going to learn that. And that will help you not get overwhelmed, because it's incredibly overwhelming when you start out in software, because you feel like I've got the weight of 50 years of software to learn. So just as I said, be productive by saying no, you can start out as a beginner with starting programming by saying no. Pick a language, start getting good at it, join our community, and then slowly build up those other skills.
100%. That's great advice, Scott. Ali is saying in the comments, Ali is saying, can you talk about how you approach learning something new?
I love analogies. I like analogies. So I'm teaching Git on my YouTube right now. I'm doing a Git 101 series, and I would encourage people to go and check that out. And in doing that, I thought about, like, how do you explain Git to somebody? How do you even explain source control to someone? And I started talking about it in terms of time travel, because we all love time travel, and we're watching Netflix and seeing how people go into the other timeline and they kill their grandfather, and then you've never been born, you killed your grandfather. That's a really cool, fun way to think about how software works, right? And like source control, I made a branch and I did this and I changed it and I merged it back into this timeline. So whenever I want to learn something new, I look at something real in the real world and I come up with some kind of an analogy, right? Like, for example, if you think about like C Python, we had a great talk earlier on C Python and the low-level things that make Python work. That's basically teaching us how to drive a stick shift. But some of us just take combis and just take an Uber, right? Or you take Taxify. And that's cool, because the C Python people, they know how to fix the car, and the rest of us just get in the minibus. You know what I'm saying? And that's okay. I don't need to be a mechanic to just ride in the minibus.
That's fantastic.
Or
you said combis,
right? I mean, I'm trying to be inclusive of the whole continent.
Laughing at
because when I was in, I stayed in Skies in Bulawayo, and the ETs, the emergency taxis, the combis, and the minibuses for folks that aren't from that area. The guy's always hanging out of the minibus. You know, have you've been to Skies? And he's always like, you know, and they're like, oh yeah.
Luis actually lives in Bulawayo, so he's probably he's probably laughing so hard. But that's fantastic. I will give some time. Does anyone have any last minute questions? We are at the end of this session, but I think we can take one more question if anyone would like to ask Scott something. This has been really great, by the way. I think this has been so fun. Yeah. Anyone have any other questions?
Thank you for having me.
We'll give it a bit. Yes, we do. Combis are amazing. Combis are so dangerous. Dustin is saying Git has never sounded so thrilling. Yes, I think we should all watch the series. It looks good. Okay, Peter. Peter is saying, would you advise to sticking to a particular channel for sharing content you've created? Oh, and then Ali is saying, can you talk about what you're excited about? So maybe take Peter's and then Ali's.
Sticking to a particular channel. So we have a saying in the US, I don't know if it's a universal saying, putting all the wood behind one arrow. I put everything at Hanselman.com, and then it kind of fans out from that. So the arrow that I'm putting all the wood behind when I throw my bow and arrow is my website. If I go and spread things out and I have 15 different websites or 15 different Twitter accounts, I'm diluting my content. So yes, I think pick a channel that makes you happy. Don't start with 3. Don't say, okay, I've gone from 0 to a YouTube and a TikTok, and just pick one, put all the wood behind one arrow, aim, and focus. That would be my tip to Peter. And then Ali's asking about what I'm excited about.
And then we'll just take one more.
What am I excited about? There's just so much stuff going on. I like physical things like Raspberry Pis and stuff. Like on my desk here, I've got like all kinds of Raspberry Pis, and like I'm working on a Raspberry Pi robot that I'm working on, but like I have a broken wheel, so I'm trying to fix that. I like physical stuff. I like teaching people how to like do IoT things. I'm working on a Pi portal, a Python portal. You know this device, the Pi dashboard, and I'm making it show my blood sugar because I'm diabetic. So I write a little bit of Python, use MicroPython and CircuitPython, and then it goes out. And so then I can have a little screen that will, there you go, it's starting up. And it will go up, and I can put it on my wall, and it'll show my family my blood sugar. So if I'm having a low blood sugar.
Wow.
Ishugela.
That's very, very cool. That's awesome. I'm excited about that. Looks super cool. I also am very interested in CircuitPython and Python for hardware. So very excited to see that you're doing that. It's almost on the hour. So I don't know. Yao has one question more. So I don't know. Maybe you can answer Yao's and then call it quits. So Yao is saying, what challenges did you face when starting software engineering, and how
my biggest challenge in doing software engineering was when they told me I needed to know advanced math, and they told me I had to learn calculus, and it almost killed me. It was just incredibly difficult. I found that I needed to focus on Boolean algebra and understand logic, but calculus was not useful to me for the things that I'm doing. I'm not a data scientist. So for regular coding, regular programming, I think the challenge was someone telling me that I had to learn something, or I wouldn't be you have to learn 2 years of calculus or you won't be a good programmer. So yeah, the challenges are usually what they call gatekeeping, when someone tells you, well, you're not really a Python programmer unless you take 3 years of calculus. So yeah, that was my biggest challenge. By the way, that's my Python portal showing my blood sugar, and then an arrow. I can't really see, but yeah, it's like it turns green and red and yellow based on my blood sugar being low or high.
Very, very cool. Awesome. Well, I think that is all the time we have for this session. We just have to check if the next session is actually going to happen or not. But if you do have questions for Scott, Scott is a really friendly person, clearly. I don't know, Scott,
I think
where
Twitter
would you
is a good place. That's the place where I'm putting all the wood behind one arrow. But I would encourage people to go to my blog at hanselman.com. And then you've got my podcast, my YouTube is all linked off of that homepage there. And that would be a really great place to stay in touch.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. Thank you to Scott. This has been a great session. 100%. Yay, Zimbos. This is Zimbos taking over the continent. So thanks everyone. Exactly. Zimbabwe is just winning today. So that's perfect. Yeah, thanks everyone. You can stay on the stage area. If we're having the keynote, it will happen here on the stage. We'll update you soon. Thanks.